Howdy y'all, welcome back. It's Hidden Purple, back again for yet another in-depth game review. This week, I ended up playing a game that I picked up a while ago that I've been planning on playing a little over a month now. Mages of Mystralia was released about a year ago on May the 18th, 2017. After a very successful Kickstarter, Borealis got to work producing their game. This game promised to have a story with depth and an original and interesting spellcrafting system. They delivered on one of these points. Honestly, when I first played the game, I really wanted to give it a bad review. And I still will, but by the late game, it didn't end up being quite as bad as first impressions would have had me believe. Mages of Mystralia features one of the most poorly written stories I've experienced in an indie title. Ordinarily, story is where an indie game is expected to stand out, so this was a little disappointing. Take Undertale, for example. While it features some spotty gameplay and artwork, it has one of the best stories I've ever seen to come out of the indie genre, which is why it's been able to develop such a rabid and toxic fan base. Mages of Mystralia's dialogue is quite terrible, perhaps the worst I've ever seen. I put some of the worst offenders in the background. Go ahead, pause the video and have a look. The character interactions are forced and awkward, and it completely pulled me out of the experience. Mages also feature some of the worst world building there is. The references to the game's lore constantly contradict itself. At the beginning, it suggests that there's only one magic user born every 10 years. That means that at any given time, there could only be 7 to 10 mages in the world, but then throughout the game, they make references and suggestions that the old order of mages was much larger than that. Then there's this bit in the opening credits, Story and Lore by Ed Greenwood. This dipshit wouldn't know good lore if it kicked him in the nuts. I'm calling you out, Borealis. Fire this dumbass or your next game will fail. It's this Ed Greenwood. He's the reason why it took me so long to pick it up again after my initial first hour. Every time I thought about playing the game, I got anxiety. Just the thought of having to trudge through 12 hours of awkward dialogue and terrible world building kept me away for over a month. While the story is a pretty serious turnoff, Mages of Mystralia does get a lot right on the other fronts. It's by no means perfect, and there's a lot of room for improvement, but hopefully they'll cover that in future titles. The magic crafting system actually is quite interesting. You start this game with 4 spell types. Now, I'm not a fan of the names of these spell types, but here they are. Amidi for close range spells, Actus for spells that act on things around you, Creo for spells that create shit, Ego for spells that affect the user, overshields and such. Ed Greenwood, I suspect, strikes again. Getting past the stupid nomenclature for the spell system, there are some genuinely interesting ways you can use this spellcrafting system, and it allows for a lot of creative freedom in how you play the game. Though you'll probably end up picking out an overpowered spell that you spam by the end of the game. I also had a lot of fun with the spell naming. You're given freedom to name every spell you make, though there is a character limit, so I couldn't name my big fuck-off fireballs Great Balls of Fire. Take note, Borealis, this is important if your sequel ever comes out. Increase the character limit for spell names. The spellcrafting system suffers from some pretty noticeable balancing issues early on. You're expected to use the base Immedi and Actus spells. Ugh. You're expected to use those primarily as your combat spells early on, but I ended up using the Creo spell the first few hours of the game as my primary combat spell. It was basically a free area of effect spell, and it dealt more damage than either of the base spells meant for the combat. In a game where you're a mage or a wizard, you're meant to feel overpowered at some point, but not this early on when your character is still learning the ropes. It was just a little detail that pulled me out of the experience. Mages of Mystralia's artwork was an area where I felt the game did exceedingly well. The environments and atmosphere of the world felt alive as you explored and found hidden areas. I also thoroughly enjoyed the score. The team behind the music should be given a raise when Ed Greenwood is fired. I have a few gripes on the technical end to be sure. For one, this game has unreasonably long load times for such a small package. This is most likely due to poor optimizing, and I can forgive it since this is Borealis' first game, but they need to work on their optimization. Perhaps they'll have more money in the budget to focus on it after they fire Ed Greenwood. Borealis also decided to go grave robbing when they made Mages of Mystralia. They added save points to the game, and for fuck's sake, people, save points are a dated system. Games should allow me to save at any point and pick back up where I left off. I don't know whose idea it was to put save points in the game, but I'm gonna go ahead and blame ol' Ed, because I hate him. For your time budget, Mages of Mystralia falls in at about a 5. A lot of points here were lost because of save points. If you die in one of the major dungeons, you'll be sent back to the last save point you pass, and chances are, it's been a while since you passed one. so big time waster there. In story, Mages of Mystralia gets a 4. Poorly written dialogue and utter failure at world building, plus constant contradictions to its own lore and a cop-out of an ending equals a completely boring and wasted story. Ed Greenwood ruined what could have been a perfectly adequate story. Gameplay gets a 6. It's a lot of fun to mess around with the spell crafting system, and the creative way that it fits into the puzzle mechanics are very interesting, but it has a lot of balancing issues that need to be addressed. They have a lot of room for improvement. Plus, this game has save points, and that's 2 points off by itself. Music and artwork gets an 8. A thoroughly enjoyable score and some pretty interesting artwork pulled the entire experience together. Honestly, the environments did more for the story and world building than the writing ever did. This leaves us with the following final scores. Kind of depressing, I know, but it could have been much worse. I would still recommend this game if you're ever bored and you have an extra 20 bucks. Even with all the negatives, I still had fun playing during the mid to late game. It's an overall fun experience, and you should support these creators. I'm cautiously optimistic for any future titles they might release. Hopefully without the assistance of Ed Greenwood. Anyway, thanks for tuning in this week, y'all. If you liked the video, be sure to help out by leaving a rating or a comment and especially sharing this video. Let me know your thoughts down below and be sure to tune in next week when I review something. I think I might do Steven Universe, but I'm not 100% sure yet. Guess we'll see next Friday. I'm out of here, y'all. Peace. Oh, one more thing. Ed Greenwood?
You're fired.